Good evening, dear listeners. This is Fuang, and as always, I'm so happy to be back with you at 7:15 p.m. every night, sharing stories filled with emotion and reflection. Tonight, I'd like to bring you a true story, told to me directly by the person who lived it. With their permission, I've rebuilt it into a complete narrative. The story is called One Reckless Night, the Director and the Devious Secretary, and the Price He Paid. Now, let's walk into the story together. Hai's office was on the 25th floor, an island of glass and steel, completely shut off from the sweltering heat and dusty chaos of the city below. Up here, the temperature was always kept at a perfect 72 degrees, cool, sterile, almost too clean. And for the last 10 years, Hai's life had been exactly like that room. Orderly, polished, successful, but missing the messy chaos of anything truly alive. He sat there, idly turning an expensive Mont Blanc pen between well-groomed fingers. In front of him was a tower of resumes, candidates for the position of his new secretary. The 10th one, just that morning. And honestly, they all blurred into one. Perfectly tailored office dresses, practiced corporate smiles, and that heavy cloud of Chanel perfume that clung to the air until it almost made his head hurt. Hai was tired of the same fake perfection, over and over again. Then, knock. Knock. A soft knocking on the door. Not timid, but not rude either. There was a rhythm to it, almost like the opening bars of a song. "Come in," Hai said, his voice low, eyes still on his computer screen. The door opened, and strangely, it felt like the air inside the room shifted. It wasn't the choking, overdone perfume of the others. Instead, a light, sweet scent drifted in. Vanilla, warm and soft, clean, almost innocent, and yet, somehow, deeply, quietly provocative. A young woman stepped inside. "Good morning, Director. My name is Hien. I'm here to interview for the secretary position." Her voice wasn't high and sweet like a songbird's. It was a little husky, like someone who had just woken up from a long nap, a lazy, dangerous kind of softness. Hai finally looked up. In front of him stood a girl, maybe 23, 24. She wore a white silk blouse that draped gently over her figure. Nothing revealing, but that modesty only made a man's imagination work harder. A black pencil skirt hugged her slim waist, and her legs were smooth and fair. "Have a seat," he said. Hien walked forward. The sound of her heels on the wooden floor, clack, 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 each step landing like a beat against his chest. And then, the first fateful moment, she handed him her file. And as she did, the back of her little finger brushed very lightly across the back of his hand. Just the slightest touch. Cool. Soft, almost like chilled silk. But that was all it took. A jolt shot straight up his spine, sharp, electric, startling. At the same time, that faint vanilla scent slipped into his senses. Deeper. Closer. "I'm sorry, Director," she said quickly, pulling her hand back. She gave him a shy little smile, but her eyes were too deep, too dark, too wet, like they could pull a man in and drown him. Hai forced himself to refocus. He opened her file, but the words on the page seemed to swim. "You don't seem to have much experience in this position?" he asked. Hien tilted her head slightly. A lock of black hair slid down over her shoulder. "That's true," she said gently, "but I learn very fast, and I know how to keep my boss happy with my dedication." Just one word, dedication, but the way she said it made the air in the room feel heavier. He went on, asking about pressure, overtime, business trips, and then casually, "Do you have a boyfriend? Would the hours be a problem for you?" Hien smiled. "I'm single, Director. I devote all my time and energy to work. I don't mind staying late, I just worry. You might not want me to." The room suddenly felt warmer. Hai's heart skipped, then started beating harder. Finally, he closed the file. "All right, 2-month probation. You start tomorrow." Hien's smile widened. She stood, bowed slightly, and walked out. Her heels clicked slowly away, but that warm vanilla scent still lingered, curling around his senses. The door closed. And Hai had no idea that the moment he nodded his head and said yes was the exact moment he opened the door to his own personal hell. Outside, dark clouds were slowly gathering over the city. A storm was coming, and from that day on, his life would never be peaceful again. A week passed. Hai's office was still the same perfectly arranged space, but somehow it no longer felt like a lifeless glass box. Something warmer had slipped in, something softer, more dangerous. And it all started with a cup of morning coffee. His old secretary used to leave a cup of iced black coffee on his desk every morning. By the time he arrived, the ice would be melted, the drink watery and bland. But Heian was different. 7:30 a.m. Hai walked into his office and tossed his briefcase on the sofa. Right then, the rich aroma of freshly ground Arabica coffee wrapped around him. Warm, deep, comforting, awakening senses that had grown dull. "Good morning, Director." Heian stepped out from the little pantry area. Today she wore a dark moss green dress, fitted but elegant. A V neckline dipped just low enough to show a graceful stretch of pale skin at her throat, modest but quietly seductive. Under the morning light, the fabric seemed to ripple with every movement she made. In her hand, a steaming cup of coffee. A faint curl of steam rose like a sigh. "Here's your coffee," she said. "I cut back a little on the sugar and added some low-fat milk. You've been rubbing your temples a lot lately. Too much sweetness in the morning just makes you more tired." She set the cup down, but instead of staying on the other side of the desk, she circled around and stood right beside him. Hai paused as he shrugged off his suit jacket. That distance between them was much too small. He could feel the warmth of her body, even though they weren't touching. "Thanks," he muttered, taking a sip. The coffee was smooth, just slightly bitter, with a gentle sweetness at the end. It was surprisingly good. Then Heian's voice softened. "Hey, Hai!" She didn't say director this time, just Hai. His name. 2 simple syllables, but they made his heart miss a beat. "Your tie's crooked," she teased softly. "Was your wife in a rush this morning?" The words were light, but they went straight into the sorest part of his pride. Before he could answer, she added, "Let me fix it for you." She stepped closer. Now, she was standing right between his knees as he sat in his chair. The distance between them disappeared. Her slim fingers reached for his collar. Just that gentle touch on his neck sent a shiver running down his back. The knot of his tie, his shirt collar, the sensitive skin just beneath his jaw, all of it now resting in the hands of a young woman half his age. Her fingers brushed over his skin, warm, soft, intentional. He found himself holding his breath, afraid that even breathing too hard might break something fragile in this charged moment. "You're so tense," he murmured with a small laugh, her breath grazing his forehead. Slowly, carefully, she straightened the tie, each movement unhurried, almost like a caress. Her long hair slipped forward and brushed against his cheek, leaving behind a strange tingling. His heart hammered. His body wanted to move closer. But his mind was frantically trying to pull him back. "Heian," he said quietly, his voice gone rough. "Shh, almost done," she whispered. Her tone was honey-sweet. At last, the tie was perfectly straight, but she didn't step back. Both her hands slid down the front of his shirt, smoothing the fabric over his chest with a light, accidental stroke, a touch that felt almost like possession. Their eyes met. In hers was a glint of provocation, in his, confusion, and a dangerous kind of excitement. "There," she smiled. "Now you look handsome." She winked playfully, then turned and walked away, as if nothing at all had happened, leaving Hai sitting there with his heart pounding out of rhythm. But that was only the first tug on the rope. That afternoon, the second accident happened. In the narrow space between the photocopier and the wall, Heian slipped past him instead of waiting. Her soft back brushed against his chest. Her curves pressed against him for just a heartbeat, barely a second, but it was enough to burn through his carefully built self-control. "It's so cramped," she laughed lightly. "I'll take the other way next time." Her tone was innocent. Her eyes were not. Hai stood there, cheeks burning, heart racing. He glanced at the family photo on his desk, a gentle wife, 2 laughing children. On one side, responsibility. On the other, a temptation that was becoming harder and harder to resist. Later that day, Heian appeared at his door again. "Hi, are you free tonight?" she asked softly. "I need help going through a bid proposal. I'm afraid I won't be able to finish it alone." He looked at the clock. He looked at the family photo. Then he looked into her eyes. And the moment he said, "Fine, we'll work late tonight," that was the moment he took one step further, into the abyss. Heian smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. The office door closed, and the darkness began to gather around his life. 7 p.m. The 30-story office building was slowly falling silent. No more rushed footsteps in the halls, no more printers whirring, no more end-of-day chatter. Just the wind grazing the thick glass windows and the dull hum of the vents. In Hai's office, most of the overhead lights were off. Only the warm desk lamp and the glow of the city outside lit the room, casting it in a half-light, private, intimate, and dangerous. He loosened his tie, feeling the weight pressing down on his chest. Numbers filled his screen, but none of them stuck in his mind. Then, click. The sound of something being set down on the glass coffee table. He turned. He stood there. This was not the professional, buttoned-up secretary from the daytime. Now she was softness made human, danger made beautiful. She had taken off her blazer. She wore only a silk camisole dress beneath, with a thin shawl loosely draped over her shoulders. Bare collarbones, smooth skin glowing under the warm light, the kind of vulnerability that wasn't really vulnerable at all. "Take a break," she said softly. "I ordered some food." On the table were 2 plates of steak and a bottle of red wine, already opened. "Wine?" I asked. He sounded surprised, but he didn't say no. "Just a little," she smiled. "To help you think and to help you sleep. Your eyes look so tired." He moved from his desk to the sofa, a little closer to her now. He took the glass she handed him, careful not to touch her fingers, but her scent was already there, the faint sweetness of perfume and something purely feminine underneath. "Your wife didn't call?" Ian asked casually, cutting her steak. She lifted a piece slowly to her lips. The wine glass trembled slightly in his hand. "He lied." Ian smiled knowingly. "You're not very good at lying, you know," she said gently. "Let me guess. She's busy with the kids, with the bills, with everyday worries, and somewhere along the way, she forgot that her husband also needs to be asked if he's tired, if he's lonely." Every word she spoke slid straight into the rawest parts of him. I didn't reply. He just drank. The wine burned on the way down, but he welcomed the burn. Ian shifted. Instead of sitting across from him, she stood, walked around the table, and sat down right next to him. Their legs brushed. Heat, touched heat. "Men like you," she murmured, eyes soft but clear. "Out there, you control everything, but at home, sometimes you feel like you don't belong. Isn't that right?" He turned to look at her. Her gaze was full of understanding, full of a tenderness that felt like it saw right through him. For the first time, Hai admitted it. He was tired, he was lonely. He wanted to be heard, to be seen, not just as a provider, but as a man. "I get it," Ian whispered. Her hand slid over his. It was a small touch, but it wasn't just skin against skin. It reached deeper. "These hands," she said quietly, "so strong, so capable, but it's a shame. No one holds them when you're exhausted." He looked down at her hand, small, soft fingers gently lacing into his. His heart pounded. Her eyes flicked down to his lips. The air in the room grew hotter. "If I were your wife," she breathed. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Their faces drifted closer and closer, until his lips were just a breath away from hers. And then, ring tick! The desk phone shattered the moment. I jerked back. Ian flinched, then recovered quickly, a faint smile on her lips. It was just security, calling to remind him to lock up. The spell broke. Shame rushed in right behind it. "It's late," I said, his voice unsteady. "We should go." Ian wrapped the shawl back around her shoulders, still smiling. "Of course," she said softly. "We wouldn't want your wife to worry, would we?" They walked to the elevator in silence. Inside the small metal box, their shoulders almost touched. Her hand brushed his. This time, he didn't pull away. When the doors opened, the night breeze rushed in. "Sleep well," Ian said, stepping into a taxi without looking back. Hai stood alone on the sidewalk. Later that night, he lay in bed beside his wife, his body turned away from her. And in his dreams, there was no home. No children's laughter, only red wine, and a woman in a silk dress, standing in the half-dark of his office. The business trip to the seaside city came in the middle of the week. The luxury resort project his company had been chasing was finally nearing the signing stage. He and Ian took the midday flight. As soon as they stepped out of the airport, the salty wind washed over them, wiping away the stale office air. 500 kilometers away from home, Hai wasn't a tired husband anymore. He was a successful businessman, free, polished, charming. The resort sat alone on a peninsula, private, elegant, and full of temptation. Ian returned from the front desk with a slight frown that didn't quite reach her eyes. "There's a small issue," she said. "The deluxe room you booked got messed up in the system. They only have one villa left, 2 bedrooms, ocean view, shared living room. Is it okay if we share the villa? We'll still have separate bedrooms and keys." Hai hesitated. In theory, it went against every rule he'd ever followed. But the sun was blazing, he was tired, and Hyun's expression was apologetic. He sighed. All right, that's fine. He didn't know that the villa had been designed for couples, not for a boss and his secretary. 9 p.m., the dinner with the partners went well. Champagne popped, hands were shaken, contracts were hinted at. Hai drank more than usual. Back at the villa, the world was quiet except for the sound of waves sliding onto the shore. He changed into a white t-shirt and shorts, stepped out onto the balcony, and lit a cigarette. Then, a splash. He looked down. Under the pale moonlight and the golden glow of the pool lights, a figure moved through the water, smooth, fluid, like a mermaid. Hyun. She wore a one-piece black swimsuit that hugged every curve. Her bare back arched gracefully as she swam. Her skin looked almost luminous against the water. She glided to the edge of the pool, right below his balcony. She pushed her wet hair back, revealing a bare, fresh face, no makeup, still glowing. Water traced a path from her hair, down her neck, over her collarbones, and disappeared into the tight fabric of her swimsuit. She looked up. Their eyes met, and she smiled. "The water's amazing, Hai. Want to come down and swim with me?" she called up. He answered hoarsely from above. "I'm fine up here, just getting some air," she sighed, pretending to be disappointed. "What a shame. Swimming alone is so boring. This pool is huge. It feels like the ocean." She braced her hands on the edge of the pool and lifted herself up slightly. Her chest rose with the motion, and Hai swallowed hard. The cigarette burned down to the filter without him even noticing. "I'll come up then," she said lightly. Hyun climbed out of the pool. The wet fabric clung to her body like a second skin. Water dripped from her legs onto the wooden deck as she wrapped a towel loosely around herself. And instead of going to the bathroom downstairs, she walked up the stairs toward his balcony. Bare feet on the steps, the scent of chlorine, salt, and warm skin following her. "Can I borrow your lighter?" she asked when she reached him. He fumbled for it. "You smoke?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said. "When I feel alone." The lighter flared, illuminating her face, glistening skin, bright eyes, slightly parted lips. She took a drag, exhaled toward the sea. The wind picked up. Hyun shivered slightly, wrapping her arms around herself. The towel slipped just a little. "I'm cold," she murmured. Hai's protective instinct rose, overriding caution. "You should go inside. You'll catch a cold," he said. "I will," she whispered. "But just a minute more. Are you cold, Hai?" Before he could answer, she stepped forward and suddenly wrapped her arms around him. Her wet, cool body pressed against his chest. The damp towel, the thin swimsuit, his t-shirt. None of it stopped the shock of contact. "Just let me borrow your warmth," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Just for a moment. I'm freezing." His hands hovered in the air for a second, then slowly lowered to her back. Her skin beneath the towel was impossibly smooth. His fingers traced up her spine almost of their own accord. Hyun let out a tiny sound in her throat, barely audible, but enough to blow open a door he'd been trying desperately to hold shut. He tightened his arms around her. She tipped her head up, eyes burning, lips parted, and this time, no phone rang. No sound interrupted. Nothing stopped him. His mouth found hers. At first hesitant, then hungry. Under the moonlight, beside the endless sea with the infinity pool reflecting the night sky, they kissed. A kiss of betrayal. But intoxicating all the same. Then Hyun pulled back. "Let's go inside," she whispered. "Someone might see us out here." It wasn't rejection, it was an invitation. She turned, picked up her towel, and walked toward her bedroom. The glass doors were left open behind her. Her hips swayed with every step. A silent question? "Will you follow?" Hai stood staring into the dim room. Only the bathroom light was on, casting a faint glow. He looked down at his wedding ring. It still gleamed on his finger, but it felt strangely weightless. He slipped it off, put it in his pocket, and followed her inside. The glass door slid shut behind him. Click. And just like that, the cage closed. The rest of that night was a storm, and that storm was exactly what destroyed him. Hyun knew exactly what she was doing, and while he lost himself completely, she never truly closed her eyes. At the height of it all, while his guard was down, she shifted slightly, just enough to angle his face toward the TV cabinet, where, nestled between fake flowers in a vase, a tiny red light blinked, again and again. A phone camera, recording everything, every look, every sound, every moment of weakness. By the time Hai collapsed onto the bed, exhausted and satisfied, the damage had already been done. He pulled her into his arms and murmured that it was wonderful. She smiled sweetly, got up for water, and in 2 swift, practiced motions, stopped the recording and slipped the phone into her bag. Then she came back and lay in his arms again like the perfect lover. He fell into the deepest sleep he'd had in years, without realizing that beside his head, in her handbag, she was carrying a little Pandora's box that could blow up his entire life. Outside, the waves kept crashing into shore, but now they sounded less like a lullaby and more like the mocking laughter of fate. Morning. Harsh sunlight sliced through the curtains and hit Hai straight in the eyes like a sharp blade. His head pounded, his throat was dry. He reached out for the familiar shape of his pillow and instead found empty space. Then the memories flooded in. The pool, the kiss, her body, the madness. He shot upright, panicked. The room was a mess, twisted sheets, pillows scattered, the air heavy with the scent of skin and sex. But Hien was gone. Relief flickered inside him, immediately swallowed by fear. He stumbled into the bathroom and turned the shower on, as cold as it would go. He scrubbed himself like he could wash the night off his skin, off his soul. Then the cold water hit his back, and he flinched hard. In the mirror, a long, angry red scratch ran from his shoulder down toward his lower back. He froze, staring. That mark wasn't just a scratch, it was evidence. How was he going to explain that to his wife? He dressed quickly, buttoned his shirt all the way up, and knotted his tie so tight it almost choked him. In the mirror, he looked like Director Hai again, composed, authoritative, but his eyes betrayed him. He walked out to the living room. The smell of eggs and toast greeted him. Hien was in the kitchen, wearing a long white maxi dress. Her hair was tied up neatly, no makeup, soft, domestic, almost angelic. She turned as she heard him. "Good morning, Hai," she said with a bright smile. "Breakfast is ready. Eat something before we head to the airport." Her calmness made his skin crawl. "Hien," he began. "About last night?" She turned off the stove, set the pan aside, and looked at him, still smiling, but with a faint sharpness in her eyes now. "Last night?" she repeated lightly. "What about it?" He swallowed. He had to say it. He had to draw a line. "I'm sorry. I was drunk. I made a mistake. I'm married. You're my employee. What happened shouldn't have happened. They asked if you need money or a promotion, I can." Her smile vanished. "You think I slept with you for money?" she asked quietly. The way her voice dropped made his blood run cold. She walked slowly toward him, stopped right in front of him. Her hand rose to smooth his collar, a gesture that now felt more like a warning than care. "Hi," she said. Her tone was low. "You weren't drunk last night. You were very clear. You said my name. You held me. You said you wanted me. Don't blame the alcohol." Her fingertip pressed lightly against his chest, right over his racing heart. "I don't want your money. I don't need you to leave your wife. I know exactly where I stand." He let out a shaky breath. Maybe she did understand. Maybe this could be buried. But then she looked up, and her eyes turned colder. "I just need you to remember one thing," she said softly. "From now on, you don't belong only to your family. A part of you belongs to me." The smile returned, but this time, it was the smile of someone who knew they had complete control. "Now eat," she added lightly. "We should head back. I'm sure your wife Lan is waiting for you." The way she said his wife's name, so casually, made his stomach twist. Breakfast felt like torture. He chewed without tasting anything. Hien ate calmly, checked her phone now and then, her lips curving in a knowing little smile. On the plane back, Hai pretended to sleep. But all he saw behind his closed eyes were disasters waiting to happen. When they landed, he grabbed his suitcase and hurried ahead, desperate to get away. "Hai," she called in the middle of the terminal. He turned, heart in his throat. She walked up to him, holding a small gift bag. "You forgot this," she said sweetly. "A present for little Bong. I saw this doll and thought it was perfect for her. You can tell her daddy picked it out." He froze. She knew his daughter's name. She knew everything. "Thanks," he muttered. "See you at the office tomorrow, Director," she said with an easy wave. She wheeled her suitcase away, confident as a victor leaving the battlefield. Hai stood in the crowd, gift bag dangling from his hand, with one terrifying realization crashing over him. From this moment on, his life was no longer his own. The taxi pulled up in front of their upscale villa in District 7. The house was just as beautiful as ever. Bougainvillea bloomed over the gate. The yard was neat and green, but to Hai, it felt like walking up to a courthouse. He stepped out, took a deep breath, and tried to arrange his face into something normal. Click, the gate opened. "Daddy's home! Daddy's home!" Little Bong came running, throwing herself into his arms. He scooped her up, breathing in the sweet baby powder scent of her skin. His chest tightened. This was why he worked so hard. This was everything, and he had betrayed it. Lan stepped out from the house. Simple clothes, no makeup, a gentle smile. "You're back," she said warmly. "I made crab soup, your favorite." She moved closer to grab his suitcase. As she did, she paused, frowning slightly. Her nose brushed his shoulder. He froze. "You change your cologne?" she asked slowly. "It's a little strong. And why do you smell so much like cigarettes?" Relief washed over him. "Oh, clients were smoking a lot. It rubbed off on me," he laughed awkwardly. "I'll go shower." He practically ran upstairs. In the bathroom, he locked the door, pulled off his shirt, and stared at the scratch on his back. It had faded slightly, but was still there. He scrubbed it with the washcloth until the skin stung and bled. If he was lucky, it would look more like an accident than what it really was. That night, at dinner, Lan lovingly put food in his bowl. Little Bong played with her new doll, the one Hien had bought. "Daddy, I love this doll. It smells like candy," she giggled. Hai shivered. "Candy? Or vanilla?" He looked at the plastic doll in his daughter's hands and felt like it was staring back at him. A little smiling ghost, Hien had slipped into his home. Later that night, he lay in bed, back turned to his wife, shirt on, collar high. The room was dark. Lan's breathing was steady beside him. His phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. He picked it up with shaking hands. "Does Little Bong like the present from Auntie Hien? Sleep well with your wife. Tomorrow, the game really begins." His hand trembled. He looked at his wife, at his child. Tears he didn't even feel forming slipped silently onto his pillow. He knew then, the peace in this house, in his life, had officially ended. From that night on, he had stepped into a game he could not win and could not walk away from. From there came the manipulation, the blackmail, the collapse, the revenge, and finally, the price. But that is a story for another night, because sometimes all it takes is one reckless night to destroy an entire life.